Hello everyone, I am Laethas and welcome back to another video, and today I have another manga first impressions, this time for the series put out by 7 Seas by Sheiko, Nurse Hitomi's Monster Infirmary. Now, I have read the first 2 volumes of this series, and as of the recording of this video, there are 8 volumes out in Japan and 7 volumes out here in the United States. Now, I have read these first 2 volumes, as I've said, and they retail for $13 US. So they are on the more expensive side of volumes. They are in the 7 Seas standard size, and this does follow some of that Monster Girl sort of aspect. However, it's not so much focused on monster girls because it's not just girls, it is just a world of monsters, so there is that. Now, to get into the artwork, I found the artwork to be very unique and different than any I'd seen before, especially sort of the color pages, which I will show you now. Sort of like that. The coloring is very unique, and I think the shadows look very, very nice. You can just see the artwork right there on the pages. Lots of contrast, lots of use of blacks and whites. So it's a very, very unique art style that I've found. So if you like art, I think this is a very unique series for you. Now, this series runs in a seinen magazine, so you are going to get a little bit of some seinen tropes that are thrown in here. However, I don't feel it is to the same extent as most seinen series. This one feels sort of in the middle between, you know, your average, your typical shonen tropes and your seinen tropes, and I feel a lot of the sort of theming and messages that are going on in this series would feel very right at home in a shonen series. And if you read the series, you'll sort of know what I'm talking about, sort of kind of the messages that are going around, and what the series is trying to say. But it is definitely a very unique take on the subject matter that it is sort of pertaining to. And it all revolves around, of course, Nurse Hitomi and her patients and her co-workers, mostly involving her patients, though she herself tends to get less screen time in the chapters than the actual patients themselves, which is, I think, a little bit interesting to note. So it tends to be, this series tends to be more episodic, however, not entirely. Characters reappear and they sort of interact with the other characters, and so it does proceed in a chronological order that you can definitely sort of tell. And the series does a very good job of having characters in the story in a primary position, so you get to sort of understand their personalities and their motivations and that kind of thing, and then reintroduces them later in a way that is consistent with those sort of personality characteristics and interactions, how the characters sort of behave. So that's very, very interesting to sort of see, and Sheiko has done a very good job at keeping the series' consistency in mind, as well as doing a very nice job of alluding to future interactions, or how characters would interact with other characters in the future based on sort of hints that he drops in certain chapters. And you'll sort of get a lot of jokes that come from sort of dramatic irony in you knowing certain things about the characters that not the other characters in the series know until it is mentioned, and you can sort of get a nice little laugh out of that. And earlier I was mentioning about the theming of the series, and how I think it would fit very, very nicely in sort of a shonen series. So this is going to feel, in some aspects, like a shonen series, but there are definitely aspects that make it feel right as a seinen series, mostly having to do with the interactions between Nurse Hitomi and her co-workers and friends. That is mostly apparent. But when it comes to the interactions with the students, mostly that comes down to how different monsters experience puberty, and sort of how Sheiko has sort of used these characters themselves and their unique characteristics and sort of changes about the characters themselves to allude or sort of mirror a lot of experiences that people have when they are going through puberty, and when they are young teenagers or young adults growing up. So it's very interesting to see how sort of well crafted that he has put this story in such a way to where what's going on in the series is not literally what people today experience, but metaphorically it transitions very, very well and accurately to a lot of the experiences that people tend to have and the emotions that they're dealing with, and the way that people are sort of able to get over those things. So it's very unique and intelligent in that way. When I initially went into reading this, I thought this was more going to be Monster Girl fanfare, something similar to Monster Musume, but I was very pleasantly surprised at how intelligent this series actually is in presenting its messages in a way that's sort of abstract and not so literal. While the messages themselves can seem sort of simplistic, maybe naive, or in some cases maybe juvenile, because this is more of a seinen series and so some of these messages might not be as relevant to you, it's still interesting to see these messages and sort of explanations that he has for situations you may have already dealt with, and you can definitely understand what has gone on to allow him to just make it seem like it fits perfectly to what would happen to a regular person that is not a monster or a creature or supernatural being. And so it's very intelligent is what I am trying to say, and it is not just Monster Girl fan service. And that is a little bit a part of in here, as you can see by Nurse Hitomi herself. It would be hard for this series to escape that trapping of fan service, and I think Sheiko has intentionally put that aspect in there for reasons that we are probably all aware of. But yes, the series does have fan service in it, though I don't think it's very overpowering, and I think the scenes in which it is present either add something to the series or play along with the series' overall character and tone, and it doesn't distract from what is going on, and it sort of plays to the series' strengths when the fan service moments take place. So even if you are not a fan of fan service, I think the series does it very, very well, and in a not classy manner, but in a well thought out and well crafted manner, more so than what I was initially expecting from this series. So this is a series that I would definitely recommend if you like Monster Girls or Monster Boys or anything like that. Sort of those fetish type things, that you're going to enjoy this series, especially for the new types of interactions that you're going to see from these characters that aren't solely based in more fan servicey or lustful or romantic sort of interactions. These are more slice of life interactions, if you could call them that. So you get to see a different side of what Monster Girls can potentially be. And it's not like Rosario Vampire or some of those other series that are more action-heavy. This is more slice-of-life-y in its sort of presentation, is what I'm going to go for on this. As I've said, these are the first 2 volumes, so this is not a review. This is a first impressions of the series. My overall impressions are I was very, very surprised, and I'm very, very happy that I decided to pick this series up. It definitely blew my expectations out of the water, or at least subverted a lot of the things that I thought were going to be going on in this series. And it is a little bit sort of simple at times, and that is a little bit disappointing because of how intelligent the series shows that it is. So those more simplistic moments are a little bit disappointing, not necessarily because they're bad, but because the series is so much better than those simple moments. So it's kind of interesting in how the series is so good that the moments that it isn't good, while good in a vacuum, actually don't seem that great in the context of the series. So that's a little bit of another fascinating detail about this series. As for my overall sort of more general recommendation for this series, I give it a very, very high recommendation, and if you haven't checked this series out, I would definitely recommend checking these first 2 volumes out and getting into them. I was very surprised and I'm very happy to have checked these series out. The interactions between the characters seem like they fit the tone of the series very well, and the series overall is significantly more intelligent than you probably think that it is, and it's very fun to read, which is something that I haven't really touched on a whole lot in First Impressions, but this is a really fun series to read. I flew through these volumes not because they're necessarily low density, but because I loved reading these volumes. I think as soon as I finished Volume 1, I immediately started reading Volume 2, and you can see that there is a decent amount of dialogue in here, but it does not feel like that when you are reading, just because it is so much fun to read these stories, and that episodic nature that it has definitely helps with that sort of aspect of it, because if a part of the series isn't as much up your alley as another, that episodic nature is going to mean that you're not stuck in an arc that you hate. You're going to finish reading that sort of short snippet of the story, and it's going to continue going on with something new and different than what you were just reading. But yeah, I highly recommend checking out this series. I was very impressed with these first 2 volumes. Definitely exceeded my expectations, and the series was much different than I initially thought it was going to be. If this is at all on your radar, I would put this at the top of your priority queue, and if this is not at all a series you have considered, I would highly recommend checking Nurse Hitomi's Monster Infirmary out. I do not think you will regret this purchase or reading, depending on what route you decide to go. But yeah, that will do it for this First Impressions video. If you've read these volumes, let me know what you think of them down in the comments below. Try to keep spoilers out of this, especially for volumes past the for the second volume, because I haven't read those yet, obviously. I will be picking up more of this series. But yeah, have you ever thought about picking up this series? If you have, you know, what interests you about the series? Are you more confident about the series after this video? Are you less confident? And if you've read the series, did you enjoy it, and did you agree with sort of my analysis of sort of what the series is trying to do? And did you enjoy this series as much as I did, and did it exceed your expectations like it did mine? But anyway, that will do it for this First Impressions video. If you enjoyed, make sure to like and share, and if you'd like to keep up to date with all of my content, you can hit that subscribe button, or you can go ahead and follow me on Twitter and get notifications that way, because sometimes YouTube does not deliver my videos to sub boxes or anyone's sub boxes from anyone's channels for whatever the reason. But yeah, that'll do it for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I am Laethas. Goodbye.